Welcome to The First Fill. My name is Katie Meyer, and I serve as the Senior Director of Content Creation at APHA, and I'll be your host for today's episode. Today, we're diving into an exciting and rapidly evolving area of pharmacy practice, digital therapeutics. More specifically, we'll touch on a general definition of what digital therapeutics is, FDA risk classifications, and approval pathways. Before we dive in, I'd like to introduce you to my guests today, Haley and Yara. Haley and Yara, why don't you introduce yourselves?
Thanks, Katie. My name is Haley Muck. I'm the Senior Manager of Custom Education here at APHA, and I've been working a lot with digital health education programs. Thanks for having me.
Hello, my name is Yara. I'll share. I serve as the Executive Fellow here at APHA, and I'm very excited to be here today.
Thanks, Haley and Yara. I'm excited to have you both here. For today's podcast, we wanted to establish a baseline related to regulatory approval pathways available for digital therapeutics, as well as reimbursement pathways that clinicians are beginning to use. During episode 2, I'll welcome Andy Molnar, the CEO of Digital Therapeutics Alliance, to discuss more about the evolution of reimbursement and what he's seen in this quickly evolving area. So let's dive into today's discussion. Yara, to begin our conversation, could you provide our listeners with a definition of digital therapeutics?
Absolutely, Katie. There wasn't always a clear definition of what the term digital therapeutics truly encompassed, but in 2017, the Digital Therapeutics Alliance set out to develop a definition so that the industry could identify products that qualify as digital therapeutics and create a reference point for patients, clinicians, policymakers, and payers. In 2020, the Digital Therapeutics Alliance engaged with the International Organizations for Standardization to formally define the term digital therapeutic. In 2023, ISO TR 1147 Health Informatics Personalized Digital Health, Digital Therapeutics Health Software Systems was published, which included the formal definition of a digital therapeutic, which is a health software intended to treat or alleviate a disease, disorder, condition, or injury by generating and delivering a medical intervention that has demonstrable positive therapeutic impact on a patient's health. A few key principles to note related to this definition. First, the term health software, which refers to software intended to be used specifically for managing, maintaining, or improving health of individual persons or the delivery of care. And this is also includes what is considered software as a medical device. Second, the use of term treat or alleviate. This refers to diagnosis, prevention, monitoring, treatment, alleviation, compensation, investigation, replacement, modification, support, sustaining, control, or disinfection as potential intended uses for a product. Third, the use of the terms disease, disorder, condition, or injury align with the definition of a medical device. A patient who is displaying symptoms of a disease, disorder, condition, or injury does not require a formal diagnosis in order to begin receiving treatment with a digital therapeutic. Lastly, the terms demonstrable positive therapeutic impact indicates that a need for clinical evaluation to ensure that each digital therapeutic product is able to accomplish what it claims to do. This can range from examples like a positive impact on a patient's health to other forms of improvement related to specific conditions, such as an improvement on cognition or mental health. And just to briefly differentiate between digital therapeutics and digital health technologies, digital therapeutics are one category within a broader group known as digital health technologies, while digital health technologies include tools like wellness apps, wearables, or telehealth platforms. Digital therapeutics specifically deliver clinically evaluated interventions intended to treat or manage health conditions. That distinction is important when we start talking about FDA risk classification and regulatory pathways.
Thanks so much, Yara. What a great overview. Now, Haley, could you explain the FDA regulatory classifications relative to digital therapeutics and then dig into the different approval pathways available for these?
Sure, Katie. So, FDA takes several factors into consideration when determining how to classify a digital health product. These include intended use or indication of use. So, the general purpose of the product and the condition the product will diagnose, treat, prevent, cure, or mitigate, including a description of the patient population which the device is intended. Next is risk. This is important as the FDA regulates products based on the potential risk it poses to human health during its intended use. Next is class, which is essentially tied to risk, which I'll review further in a few moments. And last is regulatory controls, which are the extent of control necessary to provide assurance of the device's safety and effectiveness. So I mentioned risk being important in its relationship to class. Let's dive a little bit more into that. FDA classifies products as lowest, moderate, or highest risk. As an example of lowest risk, or Class 1 products, is a podometric smart mat that uses remote temperature monitoring for preventative identification of diabetic foot ulcers. About 35% of all digital solutions and medical devices are considered lowest risk. Moderate risk, or Class 2 devices, have a slightly higher risk of harm than those classified as lowest risk. The moderate risk device is Apple's ECG software. This device measures different kinds of electrocardiograph readings through a variable sensor in an Apple Watch. The device is classified as moderate risk due to potential for wrong information being provided to a patient, which could in turn result in misinformation about the cardiovascular risk. 53% of digital devices or medical devices are considered moderate risk. And lastly, highest risk or class 3 devices are rigorously tested due to their high risk for potential harm. An example of a highest risk device is Abbott's Freestyle Libre devices that is attached with a microneedle inside a human's body. 9% of all digital solutions and medical devices are considered highest risk.
Thanks, Haley. So, Yara, with that information in mind, can you now discuss FDA regulatory pathways that exist for the approval of digital therapeutics?
Sure, Katie. Several FDA regulatory pathways exist for approval of medical devices, including digital therapeutics. The most common pathway is K pathway, also known as pre-market notification or PMN. In this pathway, a manufacturer provides data that proves their devices is similar in safety and effectiveness to a predicate device or a device that's already in the market. FDA commonly grants approval via a 510K pathway to market products that are within the low-risk class 1 and 2 devices. Examples include the Podometric, SmartMat, and Apple's ECG software that were mentioned by Haley. They were both cleared through the 510K pathway. The de novo pathway is a pathway used for medical devices with low to moderate risk classification, which have never been marketed before and serve a novel purpose. The pre-market approval pathway is usually applied to Class 3 high-risk medical devices and require rigorous testing for safety and effectiveness. A good example is Abbott's Freestyle Libre, which was approved through the pre-market approval pathway. An additional pathway called the humanitarian device exception has been created for medical devices for rare diseases where less than 4,000 individuals in the United States are affected. FDA has created a faster accelerated pathway for these devices due to low commercial viability. This is essentially similar to the fast track designation used for drugs treating rare diseases or conditions. Lastly, the Breakthrough Classification Program that was created specifically for new medical products and digital health products that provide more effective diagnosis and treatment of life-threatening conditions that are irreversibly debilitating diseases. This classification is reserved specifically for novel products. This program isn't a traditional FDA pathway, but a voluntary program to provide patients and healthcare providers with timely access to these medical devices by speeding up their development, assessment, and review while preserving the statutory standards and pathways. An important differentiation when considering the approval process for digital health solutions compared to drugs is that digital health solutions can be cleared, granted, or approved based on the type of pathway they go through. For example, Class 1 or 2 digital health solutions that go through the FDA 510K pathway are considered cleared. Devices that go through the de novo pathway are considered granted, and Class 3 products that go through PMA are considered approved. It's important to utilize the correct terminology when referring to a digital solution and its approval pathway.
Thanks, Yara. That was certainly a lot of information, and I appreciate you going through it for our listeners. So now that we've got digital therapeutics defined, we have discussed risk classification and pathways to approval. Let's talk very briefly about reimbursement. We'll hear more from our SME next week about this evolving landscape. However, Haley, can you provide a high-level overview of reimbursement pathways that are currently available for digital therapeutics?
Sure, Katie. Up until just this year, there wasn't really a mechanism for reimbursement of digital therapeutics through Medicare. However, in July of 2024, CMS introduced a potential new reimbursement pathway for digital mental health treatment devices and added HCPCS codes for prescribing FDA approved digital therapeutics for mental health. The first 20 minutes of managing a patient's device each month and each additional 20 minutes of management. This was a huge milestone in the reimbursement for digital therapeutics arena, as it will allow for outcomes-based research to be conducted to provide rationale behind the use of digital therapeutics and the additional need. Medicaid and Medicaid managed care plans consider fee-for-service product coverage pathways or coverage via specific benefit programs such as CHIP or EPSDT on a state-by-state basis. The VA is also beginning to cover some digital therapeutics. From a private insurance perspective, the durable medical equipment pathway is one option for payment, and CPT codes do exist for remote physiologic and remote therapeutic monitoring. Also, APHA does offer a certificate program on collaborative medical billing and opportunities like RPM if you're interested in learning a little bit more about these specifically. Lastly, a bit less exciting are employer sponsored models, which include value based contracts and other mechanisms that manufacturers can use to directly negotiate with employer groups. A cash based model where the consumer pays out a product for the costs associated with the digital therapeutic also does exist and occur.
Awesome. Thanks, Haley, for breaking those down. The update to Medicare's fee schedule this year truly does highlight that these products are becoming more and more important in our healthcare infrastructure and the importance of pharmacists staying up to date. Well, with that, I'm going to go ahead and summarize some key points from our discussion today. Digital therapeutics is defined as a health software intended to treat or alleviate a disease, disorder, condition, or injury by generating and delivering a medical intervention that has demonstrable positive therapeutic impact on a patient's health. FDA classifies digital therapeutics based on level of risk to the human with 3 risk categories: lowest, moderate, and highest. There are various approval pathways available for FDA clearance or approval of digital therapeutics, and the terminology differs depending on the pathway that the digital therapeutic was approved. For example, a lowest risk therapeutic that went through the K pathway is considered clear. A highest risk therapeutic that went through the pre-market approval pathway is considered approved. And lastly, reimbursement pathways continue to evolve with a recent addition of codes to the Medicare physician payment fee schedule just this year for digital mental health therapeutics. It will certainly be interesting to see how the field of reimbursement continues to expand for these products. All right, everyone, thank you so much for listening to episode 1 this month. Be sure to listen in the next week when we invite guest Andy Molnar, the CEO of Digital Therapeutics Alliance, to discuss the work they are doing to advocate for reimbursement. And last but not least, head over to the Learning Library at learn.pharmacist.com to grab your CPE for listening. Thanks and take care.